Good morning to our listeners here on Long Island's most listened to radio station, Walk 97.5. My name is Dan Leveler, president of New York State's largest independent labor union, Suffolk AME. It's a pleasure to welcome you to another episode of Suffolk Matters, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk County AME. It's an honor to be broadcasting for the very first time in our own AME studios right here at Walk. It's a fantastic setup, and we greatly appreciate all the hard work of Jim, Patrick, Stu, and everyone from the Walk team making this come together. So thanks again, guys. We have a couple of guests today, and it's my pleasure to welcome our first guest this morning, Assemblyman Andrew Garbarino. Good morning.
Morning, Dan.
So, as an assemblyman, you've advocated for state aid for your region in Suffolk County. Can you tell me how you're trying to address issues like unfunded mandates?
Well, unfunded mandates have been a problem for a long time, especially when we passed the tax cap several years ago.
Sure.
There was supposed to be unfunded mandate relief along with that, which never materialized. So we've been pushing for unfunded mandate relief for years and years. You know, a couple bills in the Assembly we have. They haven't passed yet, but we're pushing for them. One would be to bring back the Unfunded Mandate Commission, hopefully with a little more power this time, where it actually could possibly remove some of the unfunded mandates itself.
Right.
Just because last time they didn't come up with anything, they barely met, and nothing really happened. Another thing that we're focusing on doing, you can pass a bill now in the state, and,
Right.
and it doesn't have a fiscal note attached to it. So it says, how much is this going to cost? It says, to be determined.
Right.
So, we want to push a bill that wouldn't allow any bill to pass unless it had that fiscal note.
No, that sounds very responsible. I mean, that's, sometimes you're surprised to hear some of the things that happen, in different states on the national level, and occasionally I'm surprised in New York, and that's a little surprising to me. I definitely applaud the efforts on that because, kind of need to know what you're spending when you're saying we're going to put this program in place, so.
Yeah, it seems very reasonable, but,
Yeah.
there's a little pushback on it.
Yeah, okay, so one of the big issues in your district right now is creation and expansion of sewer districts. So what's your thoughts on major infrastructure projects?
I think that's one of the things the state should be investing heavily in is infrastructure. Back when the Southwest Sewer District was created, it stopped because of some
Issues, yeah.
some
there was
issues,
yeah.
bad issues. But so part of my district was not sewered. Great
Right.
River, West Sayville, Oakdale, Sayville, Bayport, those areas. So we have, I've been pushing for it for the 6 years I've been in the state assembly. Actually, next year, due to state funding from the federal
Right.
government, Great River is going to vote on expanding the sewer district and sewering all the homes in Great River. And with state money, we've gotten there's a sewer study going on right now to see whether or not we could put sewers in Oakdale, West Sayville, and Sayville.
Okay, well,
They're really badly needed.
yeah, again, as a guy who is somewhat familiar with the subject, I'm pretty sure you can put sewers in those areas. It's just a question of how, what the design would be and the costing and everything else. Long Island is almost ideal for sewers. There's parts of the country where you have, tons of clay, you've got tons of rock. It's very difficult to install piping and make accurate design decisions going into it. Long Island, certainly ideal for it.
Yeah, well, what really happened, especially this summer, we saw due to the increased nitrogen in the bay.
Yeah.
So many beaches, especially on the South Shore, were closed due to the nitrogen problems, and one of the main causes of nitrogen is the cesspools
Right.
on the South Shore. So, I've said it for a while. These are a necessity; they're not a luxury. Sewers.
Sure. And sewage treatment, the actual process when you process through a plant, brings the nitrate levels down in the treated water to lower than the nitrate level in your faucet.
Absolutely.
So you can see how that's going to have a positive impact in the environment, on Long Island and around Long Island.
And not just environment, but also with the downtowns.
Sure.
Oakdale, Sayville, Bayport, they have so many vacancies in the downtowns and commercial areas, and because of the new rules by the Suffolk County Health Department, there's so few stores or restaurants that can open up.
Right.
That because they're not on sewers. So this is something the environmentalists can get on. This is something that the businesses can get on board with.
Sure.
So it's a win for everybody.
And, you're creating jobs. So when you talk about an infrastructure on that size, we're not talking about, a small development of 150 houses that's going to get, a sewer that's going to be installed and tested in, a matter of like a month. You're talking about sewers for an area, an entire, large block.
It's years of work.
Yeah, it's going to take people to build it, people to oversee it, people to, handle all the records and deal with all the permitting and everything else. And all of that money generated through that work tends to get spent in the area that it was generated from. So
absolutely,
that's I think very positive. So, so one of the priorities that you've kind of set forth for yourself has been taxes. And so, what are some ideas that you've had to get taxes under control and help putting jobs and essential services in jeopardy?
Well, one of the things we always have to fight with in the state is how much can we tax people, and what are the services they're going to get for that?
Sure.
Nobody wants higher taxes. On Long Island, we have the highest taxes between property, income. It's insane.
Yeah.
But somehow, as we've seen with AME and other public unions, there are jobs that are not. They're losing employees, so they're doing more with less.
Right.
And we have to always juggle on how do we keep the services up without raising taxes. So one thing we've been pushing for a long time is I see the budget every year. We go over the budget every year in Albany, the state budget, in March and April. It's due by April. So sometimes it's not done on time. But there's people talk, we need more taxes so we can spend more. We don't. There's such inefficient spending. There's so many things, pet projects, especially that the governor has, that could be cut. And it's hundreds of millions, billions of dollars that could be saved and spread out to actually do the things that we need to do.
Sure.
So we've been fighting for that for a long time. Trying to push back on some of these pet projects, especially where there's wasteful spending. I mean,
right.
They have there's the Hollywood film. There's the credit for the movie studios, which it's a good idea because it brings people to it's used a lot on Long Island and it's used a lot upstate to bring people up there and they get credits. But most of that money is spent in New York City. For
right.
Where people if they're going to do a movie and they want to film in New York City, they're going to film in New York City, whether or not they get the credit or not, because they need to.
Right.
So a good chunk of that money is used in the city, and I feel like it's unnecessary.
It could be another way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You had the Buffalo Billions fiasco up in Buffalo also, which it's a lot of money and you haven't seen much. You had I could go through a couple of the governors.
Sure.
We could be here all day talking about some of these projects that didn't seem to we spent a lot of money on but didn't seem to get anything out of.
Yeah. So again, I guess it all really just comes back to responsible government, and one of the things that's generally been on my mind, in my position in AME is, sure, we want the resources there to get the job done. And when I say resources, I don't mean just financially, but I mean, personnel as well. And so when you find out about, when I find out about wasteful spending, it kind of puts me through the roof because that's people's jobs, and those people that aren't doing that job because the money was wasted aren't providing that service to the taxpayer, and it is that fraud just compounds, I guess, everybody's frustration.
The government needs to get back to doing what it's supposed to do for the people,
Right.
making their day-to-day lives better. And right now I think a lot of people have been up there for too long, and they're trying to make things better for themselves and their friends instead of doing what's right for the public. So we got to get back to that.
Sure. So, speaking of people being up there too long, and I certainly don't think that's the case with you at all, but, something I'm aware of, every year, new election cycle, Sometimes that's happening down here in Suffolk County. Sometimes it's happening up on the state level. But you've got some shuffling around of some people. Maybe there's a little bit more on the majority on the Republican side, or a little bit more on the Democratic side, or whatever else. But maybe we could just talk a little bit about what you've seen in the past, after election cycles, and how things jostle around, and give people some idea of what's potentially to come in the future.
Well, I mean, this year's election is going to be very important because it's going to possibly determine the control of the state Senate.
Right.
For a very long time, except for a 2-year period, the Republicans were in the majority, and they still are in the state Senate, and that's going to be up for determination this year as well. Assembly, it's a bigger gap. I think there's 104, 106 members, or there's 150 total members, but 106 of them are Democrats, 44
right.
Republicans. But this year with the Senate, we have to watch out, because when the Democrats took over a couple of years ago, that's when we got the MTA tax. That's when school funding got really heavily cut from Long Island, and everything went to the city. We've seen it in the past, and I've seen it over the 6 years, that the Democratic majority, although I'm friends with a lot of them, they're very city-centric. They only think about New York City. They don't realize what we need on Long Island. Everybody, people have said to me in the past, they think every school district on Long Island is like Sag Harbor. They think we all are the same,
it's not the case.
It's not.
No.
I mean, what's the aaverage salary for an AME employee?
So take-home pay is about $45,000.
Yeah. See, I mean, it's we're working class on Long Island, most of us. So, so I think this year, with the changes that could happen in Albany, I think it would be not good for Long Island if one party controlled all three, the governor's mansion and the two legislatures.
Checks and balances, I think, are very necessary. And, everything is speculative right now. We don't know what's going to happen and how that's going to, unfold. But, I think it's certainly a fair point just to say, if one group can just do whatever they want, then they're probably going to do whatever they want. And, checks and balances are a good thing.
The good news is both Republican and all the legislators, state assembly and senators from Long Island. There's, I think, 23 assembly members from Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk, and 9 senators, state senators. We all seem to work very well together, and
I've noticed that.
We all fight to bring back this money to specifically school aid to Long Island. So I think Republican and Democratic alike, bringing money back to Long Island, make sure Long Island's interests are protected is our number one priority.
Yeah. No, and that's I think that's something the public always kind of wants, and it's something I think that we're very fortunate in Suffolk County to have, is despite different party views and maybe some ideological differences, fighting to get things done, making sure that everybody understands the issue, and when necessary, banding together. I mean, we saw this last year, on a very labor intensive issue. Both sides really came together and made sure that unions were protected. I want to thank you for the work that you did there, and everybody, again, from the Assembly, from the Senate, either side, all coming together, and that's what people hope to see in government. So it was a great example of how government can work.
Well, it's always easier to do that when we're doing the right thing. So.
Yes. Yes.
But I think the electorate sees it as well too, because you have a lot of Republicans that represent areas that have more Democrats in it, and you have Democrats that represent areas that have more Republicans. So you have voters that are willing to cross the line because they see that their legislator is doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah.
For them.
Yeah, and I think that definitely does play out here in Suffolk County. So, any last-minute thoughts you might have that you want to share with our listeners this morning on the coming elections and on the workload you're hoping to get done next year?
Well, I mean, there's a lot we're hoping to do next year, but one of the things we want to continue to spend money on and address is that the opioid crisis that we have on Long Island. We've increased money in the budget every year for that to help create new beds for people. We just passed a drug take-back program that the pharmacists have to do. You know, it's such a huge issue right now that's affecting everybody all over Long Island, no matter race, how rich or poor you are.
All walks of life.
It's everyone.
Age,
so it's
anything,
so it's something that we have to continue to address because it's a major issue. So hopefully we're going to keep focusing on that next year.
Okay, great. So again, our guest was Assemblyman Andrew Garbarino, and I want to thank you again for coming on to the show and spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Awesome. I enjoyed it.
And up next is one of AME's own, Joe DiStefano. Joe, welcome to the show, and we're proud to have you here.
Thanks for getting me up early on a Sunday morning.
Yeah,
Dan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. That's the job, right?
Yeah,
so
24/7.
Long-standing member of the community yourself, very active and involved. You've also been involved inside of AME, and working as a public safety communications supervisor at the Sheriff's Department. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your day job over at the Sheriff's Department?
Well, it's actually a 24/7 job, but we work 2 tours as communications supervisors. We work 7 to 3 and 3 to 11. We work 5 days on, 2 days off, 5 days on, 3 days off. What that basically entails is the overall communications operations center of the Sheriff's Office, in which we monitor the radio operations of all the deputies on the road. We talk to all the deputies when they are handing out orders of protection or family court warrants. We supervise some of the things that go on inside the jail. We do pistol license. We do releases. When people are released, we check and see if they are wanted in other places. When people come and they visit the jail, when they come visit inmates and things like that, we run the list and see if their licenses are valid,
Right.
to see if they have any orders of protection against them. Sometimes we've had people come to the jail where they're coming to visit someone who has an order of protection against them. So that's not a good scenario.
No.
We check for that. And just overall, DMV data when someone gets pulled over on the side of the road. People ask, do deputies have the authority to pull people over? And I say to them, of course they are. They're cops.
Yes.
So yes, they do have that right to pull people over. So that's just an overview. I have 3 public safety dispatchers that I work for me,
Right.
and we monitor their progress. We do reporting, we do budgeting, things like that. We help the chief dispatcher with the things that are needed in the office.
Yeah. So
That's kind of like
all on its own, that's pretty much a handful.
Mhm.
On top of that, you've been heavily involved inside of AME as AME unit president and additionally on some committees and boards and whatever else, which we certainly thank you for. But that's not all. Additionally, volunteer firefighting.
Yeah.
Let's
Funny
talk
story.
about
The inside story on that is when I was actually working my way through college when I was 18, 19 years old, and I was working my first real kind of job that was paying the bills. I was a gas pumper at a pilot station on Route 112 in Medford, where I live.
Right.
And it was during the gas shortages of back in the late 70s. And we were going through the odds and evens of license plates.
Yep.
And things like that. And the story goes is that a volunteer fireman had come to the gas station. I was working the overnight, and there's always a line of cars looking for gas.
Right.
And he had the wrong plate. He had a different. It was odds evens, and he had the opposite one of what it was supposed to be.
Right.
And he said to me, he said, "Listen, I'm a volunteer fireman. I need gas. I need gas to get to the alarms and stuff like that." So I said, "Yeah, go ahead. Get on the line, and I'll get you in there, and stuff like that." And he talked to me about what being a community volunteer was all about. And from that conversation, when I was 18 or 19 years old, I joined when I was 19 years old, and I've been there ever since. So that's the inside story as to how I got, just hearing somebody else tell me what they meant, what volunteering meant to them was inspired me to want to be the same way, to help the community do the things that he was doing and how he needed to get to the alarms when the alarm went off.
Right.
So things like that.
Yeah, I guess, that goes a long way to, explain, one, working in the Sheriff's Department, volunteering inside of AME, again, getting involved in the fire department and because of the time and the effort and your level of commitment, at this point, you're commissioner.
Yes. So. I was elected first go-around was in 1996. I was elected for my first term. I'm now in my 5th term, completing my 23rd year as a commissioner, and some will say that that's one of the most thankless jobs you'll ever have in your life because it's a non-paying job.
Right.
There's a lot of time involved with it. You have to get elected by your community, and your community has to basically put the trust in you to spend their tax dollars wisely. I believe that that's why the longevity I've had with them has been, to date, I'm the most senior member of the Board of Fire Commissioners in my fire district for that reason, that people trust my judgment and they believe in the way I operate and the way I conserve the money that they give to me. I spend it like it's my own. Right. And if you talk to my wife, she'll tell you how conservative I could be at times when it comes to spending money. But again, it's one of those things where people have to believe in what it is that you do and what you represent, and that's why I think the longevity I've had in my community is because of that.
Right, and I guess it makes a lot of sense. The progression in your life, your volunteerism, the giving back to the community around you. It makes a lot of sense that you'd be seeking office and, again, volunteering your time and your efforts, but you take with you a tremendous amount of experience. So.
Well, I hope to bring it to a bigger scale. When I get to Albany, I will do that, use some of the same things that I've believed in over the last 23 years as serving my community, my inner community, to bring it more broader to other parts of the community.
Now, I've known you for a number of years, and always known you as a do-right guy. And it doesn't matter what the political temperature is on a given issue or anything else. You've always had a measured approach, but you always went with what the right thing to do was. Sometimes it's easy to throw in with the group, and I've certainly observed you think for yourself, think on your feet, and respond to the best of your ability to what you thought was right. So,
well, one of the things I think that I take very seriously is that I don't do things on impulse. Mostly, I try to weigh out things and evaluate things properly before making a decision, and that's kind of like one of the things that's helped me along the way is to not be impulse or knee-jerk reaction to things.
Right.
So that helps.
Okay, so getting into a little bit of government in general. So there's some people in your party that have taken the position that government's too big, and it shouldn't be in the business of providing some of the services Suffolk AME members provide to taxpayers. How do you feel about privatization of government services and contracting out to the private sector?
Well, I'd be a hypocrite if I said I believed in it, because I don't. I absolutely believe that bigger government is not necessarily better government. I think more efficiently run government is probably the best thing that we can do. One of the things that, as serving on the PAC committee for as many years as I did, one of the things we try to impress upon our legislators was to possibly sit in with the people who are doing the job, actually, and see what it is that they do on a regular basis. We've lost too many employees to the private sector because we don't pay enough. The benefits, they're taking it away from us. All of those things that brought us here in the first place are the reasons why people are now leaving. Right. And we have to we have to make sure that our government is run more efficiently, not necessarily bigger, and it's just better. You have to be more efficient in what you're doing. And I think that getting our county legislature involved with coming to our jobs and seeing what it is that we do every day, maybe that's the answer. I don't, we have some problems with the social services and things like that. They want to cut our workforce. I'm thinking they should add to our workforce, because I think there's more fraud going out the door than there is, people who have to able to investigate it. Sure. I think that's probably more of the issue, is that people are not being investigated properly, and they're taking our resources and they're misusing them. Where I think if we have more people investigating the fraud is where we really need to be. So
I something I see in the private sector, I think everybody in the private sector gets, the benefit and compensation package generally determines the quality of person that you're going to get. I don't think it's any different in government, on any level of government. So if you say, listen, we have this really important job and people really need it, and someone as altruistic even as you are, They say, but not only are we not going to pay you, but it's actually going to just generally make your life worse. And again, I'm making this way more extreme than it needs to be, but you attract quality people with quality pay and benefits.
Correct.
Work rules that protect people, and if we think as a nation that we have a problem in government, quote unquote, you got to remember, a lot of people focus on the lawmakers, guys that kind of write the rules, but that's implemented by a massive amount of actual day-to-day people. And those day-to-day people, if you're only going to be able to hire the unemployable, the quality of services the government is going to provide is going to be less than what you would expect at McDonald's, and that's just not acceptable. I don't think for any political party or any level of government.
I agree. You have to take civil service tests for the most part to get jobs that we have.
Yeah.
Working at the sheriff's office for as long as I've been there, one of the problems and it's not our union as much as it is the corrections officers union, where they gave a test recently and they had like 900 people on it, and it takes probably one hire for every 100 applications that go through that they actually get the job, and the reason being is the low pay that they're receiving. The starting pay, you can go to McDonald's and make what you're going to make as a corrections officer with all the stuff that comes with it, and running through the back of the jail from time to time. It's not a pretty sight.
Yeah, and some of those people that land themselves in a bad situation in society made some poor choices, probably can and will be rehabilitated, but that's just a percentage of what's in the jails. Some of the other people that are in the jails, they have no concerns about anybody else but themselves, and they're in a bad situation, and they're going to lash out. And those corrections officers are literally what's between society and that person with ill intent. So to bring them in at a pay scale that just doesn't make sense. Again, the quality of your compensation and your benefits package determines the quality of your employee. And when you're talking about government, yes, elect good leaders. Make sure that we have lawmakers that are thoughtful and productive. But, you have to staff the government, the people doing the day-to-day work, with quality people as well, or the execution of those rules that were written by thoughtful and productive leaders will be disastrous.
Correct. Like I said, there was time when there was thousands upon thousands of people on those civil service lists to take those jobs because of where they stand, financially now. It's not worth it to them. And now that with the benefits, where you have to pay, the new hires have to pay for their benefits now, it's not attracting a lot of people anymore to even take the test. So unfortunately, we're caught in a situation where, and they talk about overtime and things like that, blowing up through the roof because they have the FLSA and things like that, where the overtime is rampant.
Right.
And they're not saving any money. Right. They're not saving any money.
Well, generally speaking, the guys who are going to be willing to work the overtime are the ones that have been there longest and are being compensated the best. That's the ones who it would make sense to work the overtime, because to them there's a value in it. They're going to actually be compensated. So when you're on the lower level and you're not earning much, and you say, do I want to put myself in danger all day to do this job for not much? Probably not.
Right.
So... yeah, and another thing to look at is something that I've been tracking myself. Anywhere where you see the need for a lot of overtime, what that's really telling you is staffing isn't right. You should be able to get all of government's functions done on normal shifts with the proper staffing levels. If you're going to rely on people to work all this overtime, even if you are compensating them properly, they'll burn out, and so will the service that's being provided.
True. Very true.
So, talking about government, talking about, resources and whatever else. On the state level, there are mandates that come down, services that have to be provided because it's been decided that that's the case. And sometimes that starts out with some healthy funding on the state level, and then that funding level will start to trickle off, and we tend to call that unfunded mandates. With regards to unfunded mandates here in Suffolk County, is something that is burdensome to the taxpayers. What would your approach be in Albany?
Well, that's a good question. One of the things as a commissioner in the fire district, we have unfunded mandates as well. I promise you that when I get to Albany, I am going to be the champion of getting rid of as many unfunded mandates as possible because they absolutely kill you. The state tells you you have to do something, but yet they don't want to pay for it. They want you to pay for it. They want your taxpayers to pay for it. I think it should be left up to the local governments to decide what should be an unfunded mandate, not the state. I think it should be locally done, and I think that it should be more fair. And I think there was a committee set up a few years ago where they were going to start looking into the unfunded mandates to see what can be eliminated so it could take the undue burden off of the taxpayers and say, hey, listen, that's not necessary. We're going to get rid of it. There was a committee. I don't know whatever happened to it. I don't think it went anywhere. But I promise you that if I get to Albany in November, or starting in January, I will be a champion for getting rid of as many unfunded mandates as we possibly can.
Excellent.
The schools are facing it. The fire districts, everybody who's run by a minister, the towns, everybody.
And it happens across the state. And again, what a suburban area needs down here in Long Island may not be what a rural area needs upstate. So
that is true.
Big lift there, Joe. So I want to thank you again for being on the show with us today, and thanks to our listeners as well. For all of our AME members, I look forward to seeing you on September 15th for our annual picnic, and join us again next week for another Suffolk Matters.